Tim, and this is another Real Ideal Gear Review. Today we're talking about regulating watches. And a couple of questions that we're going to be getting into as far as this topic goes. We're not going to cover the entire thing. I'm not going to do a demonstration. I'm going to give you kind of a diagram of what watch regulation includes, and a couple of examples of factory regulated watches, of home watches I've regulated here, and just watches that I've purchased that are just running and they're running just fine. So we'll talk about all three of those kind of scenarios, but let's get into this. The first question is, what kind of movements are we talking about here when it comes to regulation? Every automatic movement, manual wind, automatic movement, is going to have some variance to it or some error to it, whether it be the rate, which is the ticking of the watch, whether it's the beat error. And the beat error, I'll put a quick diagram up here, is when the balance wheel swings completely in one direction and then swings all the way back to the other direction and goes back and forth, a reciprocating rotation back and forth. That distance should be symmetrical, left and right, or tick and tock. And if it's not, it's considered beat error, which means it spends more time on one side of the wheel or one turning of the wheel as opposed to the other, and there is a time associated with it, usually in milliseconds. And so if you see beat error on a time grapher, that is what it's measuring. And so this brings up the next point. If you want to get into this, you really should get a time grapher. And I highly recommend getting a time grapher, even if it's just to measure the health of the watches, to let you know when things become an issue, whether it be magnetization, whether it be a movement that's drying out, or just something's just not right because these numbers, they're just wonky. A time grapher would be really, really helpful for that. And then just a cheap, watch repair kit or tool kit would go a long ways as well. So, am I a proponent of home regulation? Absolutely. I think regulating a watch at your house is really not that hard to do. And when we're looking at like Seiko NH35, 36, 38s, the most common movement out there, especially in microbands, it's really not that hard to go in there and make an adjustment. Now, the variance that you get off of a low-end movement like that, or an entry-level movement, is pretty high. The range of acceptability of error. -20, I think, to +40 on the rate. You're looking at a beat error, which beat error is not a huge deal until your amplitude gets really low or your rate is really wonky. I mean, those things are kind of indications that beat error might be playing a role in that as well. Remember, beat error has to do with the returning back and forth of your balance wheel. So that's really not a big issue. And typically it's associated with amplitude. So if the amplitude gets weak, then your beat error starts to mess around with the watch a bit more. Okay, so those are kind of the terminology. And when it comes to the NH35, the 36, and the 38, wide variances, when you make adjustments, you can really cover some ground. You can take a NH35 that's maybe +25 seconds per day, that's a significant amount of time. Get that down to 5, 8 seconds per day. Get the beat error from over 1 down to like 0.3 milliseconds. Those would be acceptable variances in my book, and a really good step up with a Seiko movement. So you can gain a lot of ground with a Seiko movement. With your high beat movements, your 28K movements, you don't really have the same variance. You're starting off with a more accurate movement to begin with. So making the adjustments may not gain you as much ground as it would with, say, a Seiko NH35 movement. So for me, I have never adjusted a high beat movement. They've all fallen within acceptable parameters. Now, the parameters is something else to talk about. Like, at what time do you do this? Like, when is it appropriate to make these changes? Well, if you're a guy like me, gal, if you're a person like me who wears watches and rotates through your watches, you may not notice the error, the rate error, or the beat error, or the amplitude issues, because it's just not on your wrist long enough. The longer you have a watch on your wrist, the more you're going to notice the error that's built into the watch or that the watch is experiencing. So if you're rotating through watches, regulating a watch really may not be of a high concern for you, because you're swapping watches out, you're resetting the time, you're winding the watch, like you're doing all these things to make the watch accurate for a couple of days. Okay, and you're just not going to notice a 20 or 30 second variance from a 2-day wear of a watch. So that's something to keep in mind too. And then just the overall gain that you might have. So your high beat movements, you're just not going to gain as much in the regulation as you will be on your low beat movements, on your 21K movements. So that's something to consider when it comes to when should I regulate. Of course, if you have an issue, because you've put it on a time grapher and you've noticed something, that might be something to crack the back open and see if you can adjust. Or maybe it has to be serviced, and that might be another option. So I had an experience, and this is what prompted this video, and that was I had done some regulating of watches at my house. I've done it myself. And I decided, okay, here's a company that wants to offer factory regulation. So it was Nodus, and I bought a Nodus Sector Pilot, and I had them regulate it. And what I got back from them was a watch that was certainly accurate as far as the opportunity for a watch with an NH36 movement in it. So I appreciate that, but the gains that I got from it weren't as big as I thought they would be. I was hoping for something under 10 seconds, and it was around 12. And again, this is, different positions give you slightly different numbers. So the overall impression that I have is it may not be totally worth that as far as the gains go, or I probably could have done that myself. But at the same time, they got to do it. It's all part of the warranty. Technically, I haven't opened the watch outside of warranty. So there's a whole warranty issue that goes along with this that's a benefit too by having the factory regulated. You're going to get X number of years of accurate watch wear with that because of, they've regulated it. It's supposedly or allegedly it's going to be lubricated correctly and all that. So anyway, that's something that you also gain by having the factory do the regulation. I'm not so sure that it was worth it, especially with that movement. If I had a high beat movement and they can get that thing down to, maybe less than 3 seconds in all the different positions, 12 o'clock down, the crown down, dial up, dial down, all those different positions. If you can get under 3 seconds, beat error down to almost 0, man, that would be fantastic. I'm not sure that you can actually do that very frequently with a low beat movement, but a high beat movement, I think you can because they're just inherently more accurate. So again, what kind of movement do you have? How often are you wearing the watch? How much money does it cost to have someone regulate it, whether it's factory regulated, whether you take it to a watch repair shop and have them regulate it? The dollar amount should also be part of it as well. And, really, are you that in tuned to the time that you need to have it that accurate? And if you're looking for something really, really accurate, a quartz watch goes a long, long ways. They're inherently more accurate to begin with. So getting yourself not only a quartz, but a high precision quartz. Those are some other options as well. So when it comes down to the question of is factory regulation worth it? Jury's out. I'm inclined to say no at this point. But I think that there's probably some gains there, but I'm not sure the gains are as significant as I thought they would be. For high beat movements, probably not. I think I'll stick to doing some of the regulation on my own, using the time graph or using the tools that I have. So there you go. My name is Tim. This has been another Real Ideal Gear review. We'll catch you next time. This is the third time this deer has come over here. Sherman. All right, here we go. Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tim, and this is another Real Ideal Gear review. Today we're looking at the... Yes. All right, here we go. Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tim, and this is another Real Ideal... I almost forgot the name of the series. About the 5 things that I look at when I'm looking. Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tim, and this is another Real Ideal Gear review.